All right, welcome everybody around the world. Welcome to all my subscribers. If there's any interference with the audio, with the fan that I have blowing on me here to keep me cool, just let me know. So far, I don't think it interferes with the audio, um, but I moved it a bit closer to me. So, anyways, I just want to start off with that. So, the other day, what led me to make this pretty interesting discovery? It is legit. It's undeniable when you hear it. Obviously, God put all these mentions of 40 days in the Bible for a reason. Literally every single one of the mentions of 40 days I have in this list here, and you'll see what I mean. It all cryptically reveals a pattern of what we're going to go through with the end days. But it also reveals within itself this enigma of, sorry, my hair there, this enigma of 40 days. So I'm sitting here for the last hour or two trying to solve what it could be. So I'm just going to share with everybody the verses, the enigma, the little revelation, and then my theory as to what the 40 days could be. But before I do that, the whole reason I did that little study tonight, the only reason I did that study was because unfortunately I didn't document which day it happened. It probably would have been a wise thing for me, but in the last couple weeks or so, there was a time, it's not that I heard God speak, but inwardly, like within myself, and it stood out as unusual. This type of thing doesn't usually ever happen to me. Like super rare, if it ever does, a few times in a lifetime type thing, where again, it's not that I heard it, but internally, I heard it, so to speak, and it said 40 days. And I got like the immediate impression that, oh, maybe God is telling me there's 40 days left to reform in before the end of days arrives with the judgment day. So, but because, I didn't hear the voice, it wasn't like some profound spiritual event like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. I heard an angel, I heard God announcing something, which most people would make you worried that you're going crazy. You know what I mean? But I mean, as long as it's not happening all the time, if it's once in a blue moon, that's a little different. But still, it wasn't to any magnificent level. So I didn't make note of the day, which is rather unfortunate. But tonight, when I go and look up, because something inclined me, maybe God was leading me and suggesting to me inside to go do a study on 40 days. So I was thinking about it, what if God was revealing to me that there were only 40 days left? And I think when he told me this in the last week or two, like I said, that's roughly when I heard the statement inside. Um, I, if I remember correctly, and if I worked it out correctly in my head at the time, I do at the moment clearly remember that I had worked out that it might be middle of September, right? Which makes me think that I heard it at the start of August, which would be 30 days plus 10 days type of thing. But in either case, I'm not trying to pin down any time period. I'm not even trying to assure myself or anybody that it was God or an angel telling me there's only 40 days left. However, because that little obscure event occurred, which was nothing spectacular, trust me, that's why I didn't document it. But that was the inspiration for my little study tonight. And in this study, I found something that's blatantly obvious, completely and self evident and legit, that there is clearly something about the final 40 days before God arrives. There has to be, because of the following. So, what I found is I searched for the term 40 days. It only occurs a certain number of times in the Bible. Of all of those instances, I think every single one, I don't even think there was like one or two that were irrelevant. I think every single one goes in this list of, hey now, there's something here. So check this out. This is not I'm not crazy. Check this out. Okay? So in rough order as you find them in the Bible, I kind of restructured it to a slightly different logical order, but nonetheless, right? In no particular order for right now. It rained for 40 days before the great flood hit. Okay? Now stop and think about that. Well, no, I'll do it this way. I'll just read what each one is, and then I'll give my breakdown for each one, which is a shorter form, instead of doing read, breakdown, right? So it rained for 40 days, and the great flood then happened. Moses spent 40 days atop of the Mount Sinai and fasting before he met God and was given the law and all that. Okay, and then the spies, the Hebrew spies, spied the land of the giants, the Anakim, and beheld them and everything in all their terrible glory for 40 days, it says, and then returned to relay their findings about the giants, for which they rebuked because they were so afraid. The next mention of 40 days is Moses was embalmed for 40 days before he was buried. Okay, and then the next one, very significant, Nineveh, the famous town in the Tanakh, Old and New Testament, Tanakh and New Testament, sorry, both refer to Nineveh and the spiritual lesson from it. Nineveh, it says, was given 40 days to reform or else face a cosmic destruction by heavenly fire and hailstone. Okay, meteors, whatever it might be. The next mention of 40 days is that Jesus fasted for 40 days in his great trial against Satan and faced Satan as if in a trial, you know what I mean, a trial against Satan, not like a judicial trial, right? But he went up against Satan's, so to speak, for 40 days. Okay, and then the next one that I'll mention is that Jesus, after his resurrection, it says that he spent 40 days with the peoples, you know, teaching, doing some more miracles or whatever it might be, and then he ascended up. Okay, so those are what the verses talk about happening. The other occurrences of the term 40 days, I'm pretty sure every other one of them is just like a duplicate or another mention of one of these, right? So pretty safe to say that every or virtually every single mention of the term 40 days fits in this list. Okay, now check the breakdown. During 40 days, the people saw giants. During 40 days, the people faced Satan. After 40 days, David, this is another one I didn't put in that list, but David faced Goliath. It actually, one of the uses of 40 days is that the Philistines, okay, which is the area of Gaza and all that stuff now, right? The Philistines, with their chief giant warrior, Goliath, it says that for 40 days, Goliath camped before he faced off with David. Okay, so that means after 40 days, David or the people face Goliath, face the giants. Okay, this is after spying him for 40 days, right? Then next, after 40 days, the period in which you have to reform from your sins ends with cosmic fire and hail. After 40 days, as with the case of the flood waters, after the 40 days of the rain, judgment and the end of the world. After 40 days, therefore, judgment and end of the world. Next one, after 40 days, as Moses met God, the people will meet God, meaning God will arrive and reveal himself, like he did with Moses. After 40 days, as Jesus ascended up, so the chosen ones, those who pass in judgment and will be taken off the earth while it's pummeled and reshaped and all that, we will send up. And finally, after 40 days, where it says Moses was buried, and I'm not saying Moses was bad, but just in the sense that, and trust me, I'm not saying Moses is bad in any way, shape, or form, right? But just like God told Moses, you're not worthy, as great as he was, and probably better than all the rest of Israel at the time. You know, they weren't Israel yet, but depending what point you're talking about, right? But God told Moses that, you know, I think none of his generation would enter the promised land. And I think that's the metaphor to apply here. The promised land would be the new earth that we will inherit if we pass in judgment. Those who are not worthy to inherit it. So in that sense, Moses, nothing against Moses, but in that sense, he would be representing those peoples who weren't worthy to enter the promised land, the new earth. So buried. Okay, nothing against Moses, right? It's just the symbolism. Now, let's go through that short list again. None of this is bogus baloney. This is all straight from the verses, clear as day. This is, like I said, every mention of 40 days, and this is what's relayed to us. 40 days, the people will see giants. They don't necessarily fight them during that time, but for 40 days, they will spy the giants. For 40 days, they will have to face the efforts of Satan, of the Ha-Satan. After 40 days, the people will then face Goliath, face the giants. After 40 days, the period that you had to reform in ends. I like to believe God will give you every last chance up until the very, 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 very last millisecond, right? But, anyways, after 40 days, the period in which you have to reform ends with the cosmic fire and hail. After 40 days, judgment and the end of the world. That's what the flood verse. After 40 days, meet God, after where God reveals himself and so forth, arrives and reveals himself. After 40 days, the people who are worthy ascend up. After 40 days, the people who are unworthy perish. They are buried. Into the earth they go, dust to dust. Okay, clearly here, this is no stretch of the imagination. Clearly, this is teaching us something. But the enigma is, what on earth is it revealing? Well, it's obviously revealing there's a period of 40 days for some reason. What would be the reason for these 40 days? I was thinking to myself, what would be the indicator where to take the mark from? Even if we know and think the year 2024 is the end, as I have in my book that's available on Amazon. I always forget to bring it up. Right? That's the only reference I'll make to it, right? 2024, even if we know 2024 should be the year period, okay, when do we start the measure of 40 days from, or the count of 40 days? And again, this traces back. The whole reason I was doing this little study is because I heard 40 days, you know what I mean, a couple weeks ago or a week ago, whatever it was. So, I'm not convinced that there's less than 40 days now to the end of the world. There could be, but I'm not going to say I'm convinced of it just because I heard that thing inwardly, right? But that little event inspired me to do this study where I discovered this. So clearly, God led me to find this, and clearly there's a reason why there are these 40-day periods until what is the end of days. So we got a period of 40 days, and then we get giants, Satan, okay, period to reform ends. You get cosmic fire and hail, judgment and the end of the world. God arrives, reveals himself. The worthy ascend up, and the unworthy are perish and are buried. That is the end of days, unmistakably mapped out over all those different verses from all those different books of the Bible, Tanakh and New Testament, and it's all what occurs after a period of 40 days. So I think it's safe to say, just using sound logic, that there must be a marked period, and it's going to be marked somehow, become obvious, maybe just to the wise somehow, but a period of 40 days that will be self-evident. That's what I mean by marked, where the wise will be able to say, hey, wait a second, even on day one, that, this is, something's happening. I'm not going to claim to know what that thing is. That's still part of the enigma and the mystery to solve. But there's going to be a period of 40 days. Okay? So I'm not going to try and preach we have less than 40 days because I heard that thing inwardly. No. Not like that there. I think that maybe it's true, but I just would figure if an angel or God actually said that and revealed that to me, it would have been more powerful and magnificent. You know what I mean? It was just too meager and humble at the time. And although it felt like it was not from myself, which is why it stood out to me, it just wasn't of a great enough magnitude. But maybe it was just there to inspire. So this is food for thought. And when you really think about it, because Goliath was the chief warrior of the Philistines and this and that there, and I'm not going to go down any type of conspiring or theory type paths, you know what I mean? Nothing like that there. I'm not going to say that, they secretly have legions of giants that they've kept. And that would make a cool movie and stuff. I'm not going to do that. But what it could possibly be hinting at with Goliath and the Philistines is maybe there's going to be 40 days of this standoff conflict with this Gog Magog situation now. Like I keep saying, the verses from Ezekiel name the nations that will mount up and attack Israel. Those nations that are doing it right now in the world are the ones that Ezekiel named, right? It also links over to Zechariah. It also links over to Revelation chapter 20. But anyways, we are in that situation now undeniably, because it's happening as the Bible said it would. Okay. And it said it would happen after Israel was reborn and the people are living in Israel again. That only happened after 1948. Right. So the prophecy being written 2,500 years ago would be a bit ridiculous for somebody to claim that a charlatan who just made up a bogus prophecy would be fulfilled so perfectly 2,500 years later. Not that it's a good thing to happen, but you know, I mean, the prediction, the prediction was accurate and correct, right? And there's no way you could just guess and make those type of things up. And it's just one of many prophecies that have come true. All the rest have come true. So you know, that's just like the sprinkle on top at this point here. So it's possible. My best guess right now is that when, and it's probably going to be marked by when they do maybe the first major attack on Israel or even Jerusalem. But I think even when, if and I'm not going to accuse any countries or whatever, but probably Iran and the other ones right now, if Iran and them do mount up a big attack or even a coordinated attack all together, trying to overwhelm the Iron Dome, and they're probably going to send troops in on the ground to shock everybody with a shock arrival like they did on October 7th, right? Just hypothesizing here, but it's probably what they're going to do if they're going to do a big retaliation. If any of this is going to keep progressing, if it's not going to just die off soon, if it's going to progress, that's probably how it will progress, I would imagine. Right, based on the threats that those enemy nations have verbally made for the world to hear. Right, if they had said certain things, then I wouldn't have as much reason to believe this would be possible. But I think the most likely scenario is to mount a somewhat large attack against Israel, and that might be the start of the marked period of 40 days, a period that will stand out, right, to the wise. How could a period of 40 days at the end of time stand out to the wise? Like, if God's given us this hint about 40 days, how can we find it? Like, how can we find out when to start the period from? How can we know? He must have left another clue. If he left this trail of breadcrumbs, surely there's a golden nugget somewhere. We gotta solve it, right? So I think based on the verses that are here, from which we get the 40-day mentions, I think the Philistines and their warrior camping out for 40 days waiting to face David, I think that might be the indicator. Okay. If you're going to read into it like that, you could also say, but this is getting into, you know, out there theories and stuff. Maybe there will be a period. You know, I used to believe the giants will be revealed in the end of days. Even the prophecy of Joel, you know, I could read it now, but it was just take extra 10 minutes. It sounds like it's talking about the release of Nephilim and giants. Revelation 9 talks about the release of Nephilim and giants, but it happens on the final day, right? But maybe that's just a big release of them. And accurately speaking, it only talks about releasing 4 fallen angels, and it's only assumed that they're large like giants, and it's only assuming that the minions that are released at the 5th trumpet are giant or Nephilim anyways, right? Some assuming there. The only ones that could be actual giant are the 4 fallen angel chiefs who are released with the 6th trumpet, right? But it is possible still, therefore, that some giants may emerge just before those trumpets are blaring. What if they do emerge? I'm not going to convince anybody they will, but I mean, it's at least consider it and keep it in the back of your mind. Like, if giants start running, Bigfoot, whatever it might be, if giants start running around, they don't have to be massive, right? If it's 7 or 8 foot giants will do it for me. If like the hidden populations of giants in the world somehow got out or whatever, and they started showing face and roaming around, if that ever happened, I would think back to this video right now and think to myself, okay, 40 days, right? But that's probably a far-fetched scenario, but not impossible, technically speaking, right? Satan faces off against, or the Ha-Satan faces off against people all the time, every day. So it's hard to say when Satan would exert all this extra influence in that second mention, the 40 days facing Satan, like Jesus did, right? Maybe it will just be that the evil increases. Well, I would say the evil's increased more than ever now anyways, but this is kind of obscure one. I don't think we can use that as a market event. We know from Revelation, Satan's only released from his imprisonment like 3 days before the end, because he slays the 2 witnesses, and then three and a half days later is the resurrection and ascension. So Satan is released like 3 days before the end. So he's not roaming around, unless it's 3 days from now, right? But he's not roaming around now, and he won't be released to roam around until 3 days before the end. right? That's quite simple, right? But it could represent the forces of Satan. Maybe for 40 days, we'll see the fallen angels, the lesser ones or their minions, um, running amok. Now, if that were to be in like creature form on the land, it would be like a Lord of the Rings type movie. But more realistically today, and this isn't that far fetched, it's out there sounding, but it's not that far fetched. What if UFOs start showing up with the nefarious ones, right? Not good beings, but bad beings. What if they show up and not necessarily giants on the earth, or maybe they're tall? A lot of extraterrestrials are noted to be very tall. Even the ones that crashed in Las Vegas, 7 or 8 feet tall, right? Got a lot of talk. Even those were ones that looked like grays, the tall grays, right? But even the ones that look human, like Palladian and this and that, they're tall, 7 or 8 feet tall, right? So it's not all extraterrestrials are short. That's just the shorter grays, right? Species of grays are actually taller than us, right? It's just the short ones that are short. Just like you have tribes of pygmies today, right? That's different. So other tribes in Africa are like 7.5 feet tall as it is. I can't remember, Watusi tribe, maybe, I think it is. So you have that variance anyways. So my point is, for 40 days, if giants start showing up for 40 days, or if giants show up at all, that could be possibly, it's far-fetched, what that one is indicating and revealing. And also you can imply from it that after 40 days, we face the giants, right? Because where it says David faced Goliath after the 40 days. So facing Satan, like I said, I think that's a bit obscure unless it could be symbolized or it's representing UFOs with bad beings start showing up and trying to influence the world negatively or whatever, in whatever fashion. If that was to occur as well, I would say to myself, okay, I'm going to count 40 days based on that premise, right? So in like fashion, after 40 days, David faced Goliath. That goes in hand with the Giants one, right? Or if you're considering it in terms of this conflict with Israel now and that locality where the Philistines used to be, you could look at it like that. Maybe they're going to launch a big attack, and then that marks 40 days. Okay, so the next one would be after 40 days. This is the reference to Nineveh. You have 40 days to reform it. I don't think you could map this one out. I don't think this one will be marked. How could you mark this one, right? But you'll have cosmic fire and hail at the end of it. So we can't really work with that one there in terms of what's happening during the 40 days. It's just a time in which to reform, right? So the next one is after 40 days, this is to do with the flood. After 40 days of rain came the judgment and the end of the world. So you could say that during the 40 days, there will be rain. And it could be literal rain. The rain could be symbolic of something, right? If you want to go deep on that one there. But if it rained for 40 days solid, maybe just in Israel or just Jerusalem, or maybe 40 days in the enemy nation, something like that, that would be marked. And if, it would have to go on for quite a while where it gets to the point where the news is like, hey, well, it's been 40 days raining now, right? So that wouldn't be a great indicator because you actually have to wait a fair period of time before you can be somewhat convinced that, okay, yeah, it's been 20 or 30 days solid rain in whatever place, Israel or its enemy nations, to take that as a marked event. And again, if God is stressing the 40-day period, I think at the start of the 40, it should be marked enough to know that, hey, it's the start, right? Not waiting a little bit later. So I don't think the flood and the rain analogy is one where we can divulge evidence to what the 40 days contains to make it marked, right? Just like with the reforming one, that doesn't teach us that much. So far, out of 5, we just have giants and potentially fallen angels, or Satan's forces, right? I don't think shadow people and demons are going to be unleashed on the world. I think the most likely scenario, even though this is the far out category, would be negative extraterrestrials showing up, right? Anyways, moving on. The next one is the case of Moses and Mount Sinai after 40 days meeting God. Well, during the 40 days, Moses fasted. Does this represent, therefore, there will be a famine in Israel or its enemy nations for 40 days? Now, if something like that happened, that would be marked. But again, this is not something, it's not like on day one of a famine, it's markedly obvious that, hey, there's going to be 40 days of famine. So again, for the same reason, I don't think this one we could really work with to divulge information about what happens being marked during the 40 days and at the start of it. In the final one, Moses was embalmed for 40 days and then buried after the 40 days. You could say that somehow symbolically, maybe embalming will be encompassed metaphorically during these 40 days. But I mean, that's another deep. I have to spend some time going deep on that one there. But at the top of my head, real quick, I don't think it's worth going deeper into it, especially right now, right? Maybe at another time. So ironically, the only ones that seem to have indicators are the ones that mention giants and facing Satan, right? So a lot of people do ironically believe that, there will be an arrival of aliens claiming this and that they are claiming to be our creators. And whilst when I was younger, I used to believe that because, make a fun movie and all that. It's interesting and captivating to imagine happening. As I've gotten older, I don't really believe that will happen. Also, the Bible doesn't talk about it. Might be when, Satan's on the leash for the last few days, maybe stuff like that's going on. I could believe that, no problem there. But I don't think they're going to come out well in advance and bewitch the people and fool them, because the Bible doesn't detail that. But if something like that did happen, contrary to what me thinking it probably won't, if it did happen, or if giants suddenly, like I used to believe, like I said, giants would emerge in the end of days. I used to have really popular videos about it and this and that there that got millions of views, but I stopped believing it. It's a little bit far-fetched. Now, I do believe that some of them might emerge in the very, very end, in those last few days or on the last day itself, as per Revelation 9, but that's on the final day, not for 40 days, right? So I don't really think personally that we're going to see giants running around. That's more far-fetched, even though I do believe giants exist. However, because we're seeing so much UFO activity right now, I think it's undeniable that we should at least consider the second option, which is for 40 days we'll face Satan. That just seems to be the most, ironically, the most down-to-earth one out of all the usable ones there. So anyways, but the other interesting thing is that in Exodus 24, this is where it ties the 40 days over into at the end of 6,000 years, right? So it's the verse, I've talked about this before in other videos, where it says, "In the honor of God does tabernacle on Mount Sinai, and the cloud covereth it for 6 days, representing the 6,000 years of man," which ends in 2024, as a detail in chapter 1 of the book, proven, right? So for 6 days, 6,000 years. And then he called out to Moses on the seventh day. So after the sixth, at the start of the seventh, God arrives, calls out to Moses from the midst of the cloud. And the appearance of the honor of God is as a consuming fire on top of the mountain. So heavenly fire before the eyes of the sons of Israel. And Moses goeth into the midst of the cloud and goeth up unto the mount. And Moses is on the mountain 40 days and 40 nights. So a direct connection between that period of 40 days, right, in a verse, one of the few cryptic verses that reveals after 6,000 years, God will arrive in the great arrival. Okay, so again, that goes in hand with the fact that all these 40-day verses, 40-day mentioned verses, they all pertain to the end of days in the fashion that I've described, right? So coincidences? I think not. I think this is definitely put in there by God for a reason. Unfortunately, there's no other mentions of 40 days. There might be mentions of 40 something else, but that would be another study for another time. But that takes it a little bit more off track and not less credible, but perhaps less credible, unless there's another revelation waiting to be found there. Then you have to get into the discrepancy of, is it 40 years? And you have to justify why this day-year principle should logically be applied in this case. I think it's best to just stick with this here. This is the direct list of 40 days in all the mentions in the Bible, and they all clearly pertain to end days iconography. So anyways, there you go, folks. So I think this is definitely something to think about. And the moral of the story is we need to look out for something, because in some way there's a period of 40 days. In some way, for the wise, we're going to realize when something happens, when something starts, that there's 40 days left. Is this critical for your salvation? Of course not, right? But is it interesting? Yes, right? So there we go. But anyways, let me read the comments really quick. Oh, no way, man. 40 unripe grapes? Holy moly. Hey, there you go, man. Hey, signs of plenty, right? Of all things, grapes and then 40, right? Check that out. Okay. Hmm. Yeah, it could be something like that too. Famine of, because for 40 days he went without food, and then after the 40 days he got the set of the tablets, right? Um, yeah, that's pretty interesting as well. Lots of subtle hints going on here, right? So I don't know what to make of the 40 days. It could very well be. I mean, maybe God will correct me and say, no, I did send an angel or whatever, and we whispered in your soul's ear 40 days, because maybe I'm not that good. Maybe I'm going to be in trouble on Judgment Day. Maybe God was giving me a personal little chance. It might be just that, too. I considered that. But neither case, I cleaned up myself in regards to sins and this and that. They're better than ever before. I know you keep saying that, but it's an onward and upward path. Still ain't perfect, but way better than ever before. But again, I feel a little sheepish and shameful, because if all this is true, then I only cleaned up myself a few weeks or whatever before the end, or a few months at best, right? So, but it is what it is. Better to be cleaned up at the very end than to never clean up and then get sent to hell, right? So better than nothing. And if you do achieve the pass grade, you achieve the pass grade. You know what I mean? If you stay in college for 20 years instead of 2 years, but you both get the degree, the same degree, what really matters? You got the degree, you got the passing grade. You know what I mean? Yeah, you took longer. Okay, some people are smarter, some people are just better. Some people are just, it's easier for them to be more righteous. I don't know, right? And maybe they'll be better up in heaven, more exalted in whatever way, and fine. The Bible says stuff like that. Be some who are greater and some who are lesser in heaven. And it is what it is. But it'd be better to be in heaven than not in heaven and be in hell. So we all got to reform. So I would say keep it in the back of your mind that it could be less than 40 days now. Unfortunately, I didn't write down when I heard that. It could be 1, 2, or 3 weeks ago. It could be as little as 3 days ago. I just did not write it down. So whatever, right? But on the whim that it was a legit warning, but humble, but a legit warning, we'd have less than 40 days. But I'm not going to try and convince anybody of that, right? But it's worth keeping in the back of your mind, because there's never any harm in cleaning up yourself and reforming. Never any harm in that. That's always a good and beneficial thing to do. But you really got to do it. I've really got to do it. I tell you what, when I did the last few sins, I thought to myself, the end, if the end does come, you know how stupid and bad I'm going to look for doing this, right? Still ended up doing it, right? We can't be like that. We really got to change, because this might just be a lot more real than anybody thinks. We've had plenty of warning in the Bible. I mean, all these prophecies proving 2024, the seven pillars of scriptural proof. Um, you can't make that stuff up. These prophecies are over 2,000 years old, and they all came true to the exact year. It's mathematics. It's impossible. It's mathematically impossible for it to be fake. It's got to be real, right? So, and now even Ezekiel's prophecy is coming true. I mean, you can't make this stuff up, right? You can't make it up. Um, so, because I'm on a roll, AM, what I'm going to say is, AM, PM, depending where you are in the world. Anyways, because I'm on a roll, and I feel the slight inspiration, I'm going to ask God for a sign. I only do this when I feel a little inspiration. And if I back out, I back out because I feel that I shouldn't do it. But we're talking about this 40-day thing. We're talking about signs, this enigma. God's put it there for a reason. I've been asking and wanting to ask God for signs for a very long time. I backed down from doing a lot of it, but I always personally ask God for signs. I don't get most of any of them, but I have gotten a few, right? When I asked God, I said, as a sign, please have three or four, I said, of the Israeli hostages who are who are of the batch that got kidnapped the longest ago on October 7th, right? And let it be that they're rescued, so that everybody who sees them will be like, how on earth are they still alive? They've been gone so long, because they were some of the longest held hostages. And within a week, it might have been the next day, it might have been within 24 or 48 hours, but I asked for it to happen within a week, and it happened. They released 4 hostages, and they were the ones that got taken October 7th. And it even said in the news, like I asked God, that people will be astounded that they're still alive, right? So this peculiar, unique, exact thing that I asked for got granted, right? But when these things happen, sorry, the stupid fly got in my house. You buzz off, right? I got one of those zap rackets, so I'll go chase it around and get it afterwards. But yeah, that made me forget what I was talking about. But anyways, everybody has to reform. I mean, take this stuff seriously. Anyways, I've got to buzz off too, right? So I've got to get going. I might make another video after this, but I don't want this to become super long. And the other thing I'll mention as well, right? I don't ever, and I'm not trying to make Harold Camping look bad. I think Harold Camping just believed what he was doing. I don't think he was a charlatan. I think he made very bad decisions, though. That's what I have always told people for the 8 years I've been teaching all this on YouTube and warning about 2024. I've always said from day one, whether you hear me or not saying it, that's another thing. But I've always said it from day one, and I say it very often, that we always have to be a bit reserved as much as we want or need to believe that this will happen, that God is coming soon. We have to be reserved in case it doesn't happen, right? Harold Camping convinced to the fullest and assured to the fullest so that people would sell their property and homes and empty their bank accounts, right? Because he had dogmatic reasons why they should, and if they don't, it shows that they lack faith. So to prove their faith to God, they unfortunately were a bit brainwashed by him. And I don't think he was, trying to be brainwashing, but maybe I don't know. I'm not his judge, right? But I never want to be like that. And plus myself, I genuinely am. Well, part of me is reserved that it may not happen. I am not 100% fully convinced that it will happen. I just have observed in the Bible that it clearly indicates that it will. And because I call myself a believer, I believe what God said. So it should be 2024, right? I waited 2023, nothing happened. Waited 2024. We just got past halfway through, and further prophecy is now being fulfilled. So, but I'm still partly reserved, right? So I don't want people to get hyped up, to get all scared and this and that there. All you got to do is reform. If you reform, you don't have to be scared about anything, right? I had to teach and indoctrinate my mom the other day. She's oblivious, like a lot of Christians are, to theology, what the Bible even says on many things, oblivious to so much. Still a great person, right? Without a doubt would pass in judgment, but just doesn't do Bible study. I think she did when she was younger, right? But anyways, I had to teach her and say, look, you have to be prepared to leave everything behind. People are always worried about their jobs and bills and this and that there in life, but you have to be prepared to leave everything behind. She said, oh, I know that. And she's spiritually ready for something like that because our grandparents always drilled that into everybody's heads. But you really do have to be prepared to do that. And in that essence, what's the sense in emptying your bank account? What's the sense in doing any of that physical preparation? So that's why I've always told people, don't physically prepare, spiritually prepare. And in that, I cannot pull a Harold Camping. Right? Nobody will be victim to the Harold Camping effect, right? Spiritually prepare. Anytime you start going to gather or stock up food, or I'm not putting down anybody who is stocking up food, because guess what? There will be a need for people to have stocked up food when these things happen. And we're not God. We can't dictate, oh, this will happen to me, this won't happen to me. Yeah, there's no harm in stocking up on food and whatever else to protect yourself and your family. It may actually pay off for you. It might be the right thing to do. Again, I'm not trying to give advice on physical preparation. If you want to physically prepare for things, that might actually be a wise thing to do. But I'm not giving instruction on that. My point is spiritually prepare. And I'm not saying by saying that if you physically prepare, you're lesser or it's not as good. It's just that we spiritually prepare, right? In that way, no one's going to suffer to the Harold Camping effect if it doesn't happen. You see what I mean? And also, you don't want to be too invested. I mean, it's all good building a bunker. I mean, if you're a millionaire and you built this big bunker or something, what use is that? Like, if you're a believer and you believe the end of days is coming, what use is a bunker going to be? I mean, yeah, maybe if there's giants and whatever running around you, you might be safe and have a cozy little visit, like you're in the business class lounge before the flight comes to take you off to the new Earth, maybe, right? But I mean, practically speaking and generally speaking, physical preparation is not going to be of much use. What if you did prepare and stock up all this stuff, and then the end days comes, and then something happens? It's like, oh, I got to run away from my house, and I've lost everything I just saved up for. That could happen too, right? Everything in any direction, up and down, in any way on the scale could happen to screw you over, so to speak, or to benefit you. That's why I'm just leaning away from saying physically prepare. And plus, you don't get in trouble saying spiritually prepare. You can get in trouble for saying physically prepare, and not directly get in trouble, but indirectly if things happen, right? So, no physical preparation, spiritual preparation. And everybody's got to do it, right? We're all going to be judged. We'll reap what we sow, and this and that there. I'm a firm believer that, if you mean well, and you could have a place up there in the heavens for you. I somewhat consider myself in this category, that God will make it that you suffer extra before the time comes, so that when the time comes, you've paid off some of that debt. Because otherwise, if you didn't, you just wouldn't pass a judgment. So I would like to think that part of my sufferings is from that and because of that. And it's kind of like a unnoble / actually noble way to look out at things. But anyways, it's more positive than pessimistic. Anyways, take care, folks. God bless. I might have time to make another short video before, but I don't want people to get like overindulgent in all of this. It might really build up and look like it will happen, and then might just fizzle away, and nothing will happen. Right? Let's just be ready and be sensible and consider that it could very well happen. And I think by all logic, we have all reason to believe it. Right? As I know you're familiar with, but people who are familiar with my book and my videos, there's too much evidence to show that it's going to happen, right? You can't make prophecies, 25 different prophecies over 2,000 years ago. A lot of them pertain to time periods and exact years and key historical events, and all of them come true, because that's what happened. 25. There's actually more than 25, right? But a minimum of 25. So it's pretty hard to say that those things, that the Bible's not real, that the end isn't going to be coming, and all of those prophecies were just wild guesses that happened to come true. That is not plausible. What is the only plausible option is that they were legitimate prophecies. And because they all have to be legitimate prophecies, that indicates that the rest of the Bible is true, the other prophecies that specify 2024 being the end. That's my path of thinking. And that's why I am still a believer that it's going to happen. And I'll hold out till the end of 2024 and a bit into 2025 in case whatever reason, right? But, and again, this year we might get to see the birth of a new star, the Corona Borealis, the Northern Crown, shining its star in a, what do you call it? Supernova or something like that. So, depending how bright it will be, it could be super bright when it's happened before, like 1,000 years ago or whenever it was extremely bright. But it may not be that bright. You might need telescope or binoculars to see it. But we have to wait and see, right? So everybody just get ready, right? Could be less than 40 days. Maybe that was God telling us, right? I don't know. Could be. No harm in preparing. Anyways, that's the morals. That's the stories for today. Take care, folks. God bless. And thank you all for coming by.